Zara stood by the large window in the station's main hall, watching the celebration below. Colorful lights danced across the metal floors as beings from different worlds gathered together. Music filled the air, though not the kind most people could hear. It was the silent music of minds touching minds, thoughts flowing like rivers between the Velati people. She pressed her hand against the cool glass and sighed. Down below, she could see other Velati couples moving together in perfect harmony. Their crystalline skin glowed softly as they shared their thoughts. When one moved left, the other moved right, as if they were dancing to the same invisible song. They knew each other's minds completely. Zara had never experienced this kind of connection. She was born different from the others. While every Velati could speak with their minds and hear the thoughts of their people, Zara lived in silence. Her telepathic abilities were broken, like a radio that could not tune into any station. She could hear whispers sometimes, like voices calling from very far away, but she could never answer back clearly. In Velati society, this made her an outcast. The celebration continued below. It was the festival of bonding, held every cycle, to help young Velati find their perfect matches. Zara had attended 17 of these festivals, and each time she hoped things would be different. Each time she left alone. "Beautiful evening, isn't it?" a voice said behind her. Zara turned to see Keel, a young Velati male about her age. His skin had a pleasant blue tint, and his eyes were kind. 3 of his friends stood behind him, watching with curious expressions. She recognized them all from the data processing center where she worked. "Yes, it is," Zara replied out loud, using her voice instead of her mind. Speaking aloud was considered primitive by most Velati, something they only did when communicating with other species. Keel smiled and closed his eyes, the way Velati did when they wanted to make a telepathic connection. His forehead glowed gently as he reached out with his mind, searching for hers. Zara tried to respond, tried to let him feel her thoughts, but nothing happened. She could sense his confusion as he pushed harder, trying to find her mental voice. After several uncomfortable moments, Keel opened his eyes. The glow faded from his skin. His friends shifted behind him, and she heard one of them whisper, "I told you she was broken." "I'm sorry," Keel said, speaking aloud now too. "I thought maybe the stories were wrong, or maybe you had learned to control your condition. My friend said I should try, but..." He trailed off, looking embarrassed. "It's okay," Zara said quietly. "I understand," but Keel was already backing away, his friends pulling him toward the celebration below. Within moments, they disappeared into the crowd and Zara was alone again. She had heard the whispered conversations about her many times. Poor Zara, born without a voice. How sad to live in such silence. She'll never find a bondmate. Who would want someone you can't truly know? These words hurt more than any physical pain. In Velati culture, mental connection was everything. It was how they fell in love, how they chose life partners, how they raised children, and how they built their society. Without telepathy, Zara was like a person trying to live underwater without gills. She worked as a data analyst on Harmony Point, one of the largest space stations in the galaxy. The station served as a meeting place for dozens of different species, who came here to trade, negotiate, and share knowledge. It was the perfect place for someone like her, because she was good with numbers and computers, things that didn't require telepathy. Zara had been living on the station for 30 years, now ever since she finished her education on the Velati homeworld. Her family loved her, but even they found it difficult to relate to someone they couldn't truly communicate with. Coming to Harmony Point had been her choice, a chance to build a life where her differences didn't matter as much. Most days, she convinced herself she was content. She had her work, her small quarters with a view of the stars, and her collection of books from various worlds. She enjoyed learning about different species and their cultures. But nights like this, during celebrations and festivals, the loneliness felt like a weight pressing down on her chest. Zara decided to return to her quarters. As she walked through the corridors, she passed other Velati heading to the celebration. Some nodded politely at her, but none tried to make conversation. They couldn't understand why she would walk alone when she could be with others, sharing thoughts and feelings. Her quarters were small, but comfortable. She had decorated them with art and artifacts from different worlds, things that spoke to her even though their creators could not speak to her mind. She particularly loved a set of wind chimes from a planet called Earth. The humans who lived there used sound to create beauty, something Zara found fascinating. As she sat on her bed, looking out at the stars, Zara wondered what it would be like to find someone who could love her as she was. Not someone who pitied her or tried to fix her, but someone who saw value in her silence, who found beauty in her differences. She had studied other species and their ways of bonding. Humans, for example, did not have telepathy at all. They communicated through speech, touch, and something they called body language. They seemed to form deep connections without ever sharing thoughts directly. The idea seemed impossible to most. Velothi, but to Zara it sounded wonderful. The festival sounds drifted up from below, a mixture of actual music and the harmony of mental connections. Zara listened for a while, then closed her window and prepared for sleep. Tomorrow would be another day at work, another day of polite nods and careful distances. But as she lay down, she allowed herself one small hope. Maybe someday, somewhere, in this vast galaxy filled with billions of different beings, she would find someone who would choose her, not despite her silence, but because of who she was in that silence. Someone who would see her not as broken, but as unique. The stars outside, her window seemed to twinkle a little brighter as if they were listening to her quiet wish. The new dawn docked at Harmony Point early in the morning, its white hull gleaming under the station's artificial lights. Jake Morrison stood at the observation deck, watching the massive space station grow larger through the reinforced windows. He had never seen anything like it. Ships from dozens of different worlds surrounded the station like metal flowers around a silver stem. "First time seeing something this big?" asked Captain Lisa Wang, joining him at the window. "Yes, ma'am," Jake replied, unable to hide his excitement. "The pictures in the briefing files didn't do it justice." Captain Wang smiled. "Wait until you see the inside. Harmony Point houses over 2 million beings from 47 different species. It's going to be quite an adjustment from Earth." Jake nodded, checking his communication equipment one more time. As the team's language specialist, he would be responsible for helping establish communication protocols with species humanity had never met before. The diplomatic mission was historic, the first time Earth had been invited to participate in Galactic Council discussions. 2 hours later, Jake found himself walking through corridors that seemed to stretch on forever. The ceilings were high, enough to accommodate species much taller than humans, and the walls displayed information in symbols and languages he had never seen. Strange smells filled the air, some pleasant like flowers, others sharp like metal and electricity. "Stay close to the group," warned Ambassador Patricia Cole, the mission leader. "We don't want anyone getting lost on the first day." But Jake was too fascinated to worry about getting lost. Everywhere he looked, he saw something new and amazing. Tall, thin beings with blue skin glided past them, their eyes glowing softly. Small, furry creatures scurried along the walls, carrying packages and messages. A group of rock-like beings stood in a circle, making sounds like grinding stone that Jake realized must be their language. The human delegation was assigned quarters in Section 7, an area set aside for newer species. Their rooms were comfortable, but simple, designed to accommodate many different body types and needs. Jake set up his equipment quickly, eager to explore more of the station. "Where are you going?" asked Lieutenant Ben Taylor, Jake's roommate and the team's security officer. "I want to see more of the station," Jake said, putting on his universal translator device. "This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to meet so many different species." Ben shook his head. "The ambassador said we should stick together until we understand the local customs better." "I'll be careful," Jake promised. "Besides, how else are we going to learn if we don't interact with the locals?" Jake spent the rest of the day wandering the station's public areas. He visited the central marketplace where beings traded goods from across the galaxy. He watched children from different species playing together in the recreation areas. somehow understanding each other despite their different languages and appearances. But it was in the small cafe in Section 12 that he first saw her. She sat alone at a table near the window, eating something that looked like purple fruit. Her skin had a soft, crystalline quality that caught the light beautifully, and her hair seemed to flow like liquid silver. She was clearly from one of the more advanced species, based on her elegant clothing and refined features. What struck Jake most was how alone she seemed. Other beings sat in groups talking and laughing together, but she sat by herself, looking out at the stars with an expression of deep sadness. Every few minutes, someone would walk past her table, but no one stopped to talk. Some even seemed to avoid looking at her directly. Jake bought a cup of coffee and found a table nearby. He pretended to read a datapad while watching her. She moved gracefully, but there was something withdrawn about her posture. When she finished eating, she sat quietly for a long time, just watching the ships come and go through the window. "She's Velothi," said a voice beside him. Jake looked up to see a short, green-skinned being standing next to his table. The translator, in his ear, identified the speaker as Corbian, a species known for their friendliness and love of gossip. "Velothi?" Jake asked. "Yes, one of the telepathic species. Very advanced, very proud. But that one—" The Corbian glanced toward the woman and lowered his voice. "That one is defective. Born without proper telepathic abilities. Very sad case." "Defective?" The word bothered Jake. "She looks perfectly healthy to me." The Corbian made a clicking sound that the translator interpreted as laughter. "You humans don't understand. For Velothi, telepathy is everything. Without it, she cannot bond, cannot truly communicate with her own people. She is like a singer without a voice." "But she's still a person," Jake said firmly. "Of course," the Corbian agreed, "but a very lonely person. No Velothi would choose to bond with someone they cannot share thoughts with. It would be like marrying a stranger who could never tell you their feelings." After the Corbian left, Jake found himself watching the Velothi woman more closely. Now that he knew her situation, her sadness made more sense. She was surrounded by people, but truly alone, in a way he had never experienced. Over the next several days, Jake found himself returning to the cafe at the same time. The woman was always there, always alone. He began to recognize her routine. She would arrive at exactly 1400 station time, order the same purple fruit and a pale blue drink, and sit by the window for exactly 1 hour. Jake started, bringing his work to the cafe, partly to study the linguistic patterns of different species, but mostly to observe her. He noticed small things about her behavior. The way she would start to reach toward empty chairs when other Velothi approached, then pull her hand back when they walked past. The way she would close her eyes sometimes, as if trying very hard to hear something just beyond her reach. On the 5th day, Jake decided to act. He had been practicing basic Velothi phrases with the computer, learning their spoken language. Most Velothi rarely used verbal speech, preferring telepathic communication, but they all knew how to talk aloud when necessary. When the woman arrived at her usual time, Jake was waiting at her usual table. She stopped when she saw him there, looking confused and a little alarmed. "Excuse me," Jake said in careful Velothi, "but may I sit here? All the other tables are taken." It was a lie. Several tables were empty, but the woman looked around, seemed to realize this was true, and nodded slowly. "Thank you," Jake said, switching back to English and letting his translator handle the conversion. They sat in silence for several minutes. Jake pretended to work on his datapad while stealing glances at her. Up close, he could see that her skin was even more beautiful than he had first thought, like looking at light through crystal. Her eyes were a deep purple color, and when she looked at him, he felt like she was seeing right through to his thoughts. "You are human," she said suddenly, speaking aloud in accented but clear English. Jake looked up, surprised. "Yes, I am. My name is Jake Morrison." "I am Zara," she replied. Then, after a pause, she added, "You have been watching me." Jake felt heat rise in his cheeks. "I'm sorry if I made you uncomfortable. I was just curious. I've never met anyone from your species before. Most humans avoid the Velothi, Zara said. They find our telepathy disturbing. I find it fascinating, Jake said honestly. Though I heard that you... He stopped, realizing how rude it would sound. That I am defective? Zara finished for him. Yes, that is true. I cannot share thoughts as my people do. That doesn't make you defective, Jake said firmly. It just makes you different. For the first time since he had been watching her, Zara smiled. It was a small, hesitant smile, but it transformed her entire face. That is a very human way of thinking, she said. Jake spent every free moment learning about Velothi culture. He read research papers, watched documentary files, and even spoke with other Velothi on the station when he could find ones willing to talk to him. Most were polite but distant, clearly, uncomfortable discussing their people with an outsider. What he learned made him understand Zara's situation better, and it also made him more determined to know her as a person. In Velothi society, telepathic bonding was not just about marriage or romance. It was how they communicated love, friendship, trust, and even basic respect. Parents bonded with children. Friends shared thoughts and emotions, and lovers merged their minds in ways that humans could barely imagine. For someone like Zara, who could not participate in this mental sharing, life must be like watching a beautiful dance from behind a glass wall. Jake began visiting the cafe every day at 1400, always arriving a few minutes before Zara. At first, their conversations were short and careful. Zara seemed surprised that he kept coming back, and Jake could sense her waiting for him to lose interest and leave like everyone else probably had. "Why do you keep sitting with me?" she asked after a week of daily meetings. Jake looked up from his data pad. He had been learning more Velothi words, hoping to communicate with her in her own language. "Because I enjoy your company," he said simply. "But I cannot share my thoughts with you," Zara said, touching her temple in the way Velothi did when discussing telepathy. "How can you enjoy being with someone you cannot truly know?" "I think I can know you pretty well without reading your thoughts," Jake said. "I know you like to sit by the window because you enjoy watching the ships. I know you're very intelligent because of the way you analyze everything around you before making decisions. I know you're kind because you're always polite to the cafe staff even when they seem uncomfortable serving you." Zara stared at him with wide eyes. "You notice all of that?" "Humans are very good at reading body language and facial expressions," Jake explained. "We have to be since we don't have telepathy. We learn to understand each other through speech, actions, and what we call nonverbal communication." "Show me," Zara said, leaning forward with interest. Jake smiled. "Right now your posture tells me you're curious and engaged. You're leaning forward, which means you're interested in what I'm saying. Your eyes are wide, which usually indicates surprise or fascination, and you're speaking more quickly than usual, which suggests excitement." "That is amazing," Zara said. "I never realized so much information could be shared without telepathy." From that day forward, their conversations became longer and deeper. Jake taught Zara about human culture, explaining how people on Earth formed relationships through shared experiences, conversation, and emotional connection. He showed her pictures of his home, his family, and the places he had visited. Zara began to open up about her own life. She told Jake about growing up on the Velothi homeworld, about the loneliness of being the only silent person in a world full of mental voices. She described her work as a data analyst, how numbers and patterns made sense to her in ways that social connections never had. "I have always wondered what it would be like to choose someone based on who they are, rather than how compatible our minds are," Zara said one day. "That's exactly how humans do it," Jake replied. "We get to know someone by spending time with them, talking to them, sharing experiences. Sometimes two people seem perfect for each other on paper, but they don't connect emotionally. Other times, people who seem completely different find they understand each other in ways that surprise everyone." 3 weeks into their daily meetings, Jake found Zara crying in the observation lounge. She was alone, as usual, watching through the large windows as a Velothi bonding ceremony took place in the ceremonial hall below. 2 young Velothi stood facing each other, their foreheads glowing brightly as they shared their first full mental connection as life partners. The gathering of family and friends around them all participated in the ceremony, their minds joined in celebration. "It's beautiful," Jake said softly, sitting down beside her. "Yes," Zara whispered, wiping tears from her cheeks. "I have watched 17 bonding ceremonies. Each time I imagine what it might feel like to have someone choose me, to want to share their thoughts and dreams with me. Someone will choose you," Jake said firmly. Zara shook her head. "No Velathi will ever bond with someone who cannot share their mind. It would be like bonding with an empty space." "Then maybe you're looking at the wrong species," Jake said gently. Zara turned to look at him, her purple eyes searching his face. "What do you mean?" "I mean that humans don't need telepathy to form deep connections. We do it through trust, communication, and shared experiences. We choose partners based on compatibility, shared values, and emotional connection." "But I am not human," Zara pointed out. "No, you're not," Jake agreed. "But that doesn't mean you can't learn human ways of connecting. You've already started, whether you realize it or not." "I have," Jake nodded. "These past 3 weeks we've been getting to know each other without any telepathy at all. I've learned about your intelligence, your kindness, your strength, and your dreams. You've learned about my background, my interests, and my personality. We've built a friendship based entirely on the things humans use to build relationships." Zara was quiet for a long time, thinking about his words. Below them, the bonding ceremony concluded with a burst of mental harmony that made all the Velathi participants glow with shared joy. "Jake," Zara said finally, "will you teach me more about human relationships?" "I'd be happy to," Jake replied, and he meant it completely. Over the following weeks, Jake introduced Zara to human music, showing her how melodies and lyrics could express emotions and tell stories. He explained human art, literature, and films, all the ways humans shared their inner thoughts and feelings without telepathy. Zara was fascinated by everything, approaching each new concept with the analytical mind that made her so good at her job. But more than that, Jake began to realize he was falling in love with her. Her curiosity about his culture, her intelligence, her gentle way of seeing the world, all of it drew him in deeper each day. He found himself looking forward to their meetings more than anything else in his schedule. He also noticed that other beings on the station were starting to talk about them. Some seemed curious about the unusual friendship between a human and a defective Velathi. Others seemed disapproving. A few Velathi approached Jake privately, asking if he understood what he was involving himself with. "She cannot give you what you need," one elderly Velathi told him. "Humans may not have telepathy, but surely you need more than simple conversation to be satisfied." "Actually," Jake replied, "conversation and companionship are exactly what I need most." The truth was, Jake had never felt as comfortable with anyone as he did with Zara. Their friendship had developed naturally, without the pressure of telepathic compatibility or the confusion of mixed mental signals. They were getting to know each other the way humans had done for thousands of years, slowly, carefully, and completely by choice. The crisis began at 0400 hours when a massive solar flare from the nearby star disrupted all electronic communication systems on Harmony Point. Emergency lighting cast strange shadows through the corridors as millions of beings found themselves cut off from their usual methods of communication. Jake woke to the sound of emergency alarms and rushed to the diplomatic center, where chaos reigned. Species that relied heavily on electronic translators could no longer understand each other. The station's computer systems were failing one by one, and the life support systems were showing dangerous fluctuations. "We need to get word to the engineering sections," Captain Wang said, her voice tight with stress. "But the communication systems are completely down." "What about the Velathi?" suggested Ambassador Cole. "They use telepathy. Maybe they can coordinate with their people in different sections." Jake felt a sudden chill. "The telepathic species will be fine," he said. "But what about those who can't use telepathy?" He was thinking of Zara, alone in her quarters with no way to call for help or receive information about what was happening. Without the electronic communication systems, she would be as isolated as everyone else, but without even the option of mental contact with her own people. "I need to check on someone," Jake told the captain. "Morrison, we need you here," she replied. "Your language skills could be crucial in coordinating rescue efforts." "I'll be back as soon as I can," Jake promised, already heading for the door. The corridors were packed with confused and frightened beings. Emergency lighting made everything look strange and unfamiliar. Jake pushed through crowds of aliens trying to find their way back to their quarters or locate family members. The normal sounds of the station, the hum of electronics, the whisper of air recyclers, the constant chatter of different species had been replaced by worried voices and the occasional sound of sparking electronics. Jake found Zara in the engineering section of the station, working alongside a team of technicians trying to restore power to the life support systems. Her crystalline skin was glowing with concentration as she worked at a manual control panel, her fingers flying over switches and dials. "Zara!" Jake called out over the noise. She looked up, and her face broke into a smile of relief. "Jake, I was worried about you." "I was worried about you too," he said, moving closer. "How did you end up here?" "When the systems failed, I realized the station would need people who could work without computer assistance," Zara explained. "I know these systems from my data analysis work, so I came to help." Jake watched in amazement as Zara coordinated with the engineering team using hand signals and basic spoken commands. She had created a simple system of communication that worked even with species who had never needed to use verbal language before. "The main problem is in the central power core," she explained to Jake during a brief break. "The solar flare caused a cascade failure, but if we can manually restart the backup systems, we should be able to restore basic life support." "What can I do to help?" Jake asked. "Actually, your language skills could be very useful," Zara said. "I need someone to coordinate between the different engineering teams. They're all trying to help, but they can't understand each other without the electronic translators." For the next 6 hours, Jake and Zara worked together as a team. Jake served as a translator and coordinator, using his knowledge of multiple languages to help different species work together. Zara used her analytical skills and knowledge of the station's systems to guide the repair efforts. Slowly, they made progress. The life support systems came back online first, followed by emergency lighting and basic communications. As the station systems were restored, Jake realized he was witnessing something remarkable. Zara had become the central coordinator for the entire repair effort, not despite her lack of telepathy, but because of it. "She's amazing," one of the engineers, a blue-skinned Altarian, said to Jake. "Most of us panic when we can't use our normal communication methods, but she just adapted immediately." "She's had a lot of practice communicating without telepathy," Jake replied, feeling proud of Zara's accomplishments. When the main communication systems finally came back online 12 hours later, word of Zara's role in the rescue effort spread quickly through the station. Beings who had previously ignored or pitied her now approached with respect and gratitude. The station commander, a dignified reptilian being called Administrator Kelth, personally thanked her for her service. "Your quick thinking and leadership saved many lives today," Administrator Kelth said. "The station is in your debt." Jake watched Zara accept the praise with grace and humility, but he could see the joy in her eyes. For the first time in her life, she had been valued not despite her differences, but because of her unique abilities. After the crisis ended, Jake and Zara sat together in the cafe, both exhausted but satisfied. The normal sounds of the station had returned. Electronic beeping, the hum of air recyclers, and the quiet chatter of hundreds of species going about their daily business. "Thank you," Zara said quietly. "For what?" Jake asked. "For coming to find me during the crisis, for working beside me, for treating me as an equal partner instead of someone who needed to be protected." Jake reached across the table and gently took her hand. Her skin was warm and had a fascinating texture, smooth, but with a subtle pattern like crystal formations. "Zara, you are one of the most capable people I've ever met. Today just proved what I've known all along." She looked down at their joined hands with wonder. In Velathi culture, touching is reserved for family members and bonded pairs. "We share," Everything else through telepathy? Is it okay? Jake asked, starting to pull his hand back. Yes, Zara said quickly, tightening her grip on his fingers. It's more than okay. I've been curious about human physical affection. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, hands clasped across the table. Jake realized that what he was feeling for Zara had grown far beyond friendship. He cared about her happiness, admired her strength, and wanted to share his life with her. But he also knew that suggesting a romantic relationship between them would be complicated. They came from different worlds, different cultures, different species. Even if his feelings were returned, there would be challenges they had never faced before. Zara, he said carefully, can I ask you something personal? Of course. Have you ever thought about what it would be like to have a relationship with someone from another species? Zara was quiet for a long moment. I have wondered about it, she said finally, especially since meeting you. You've shown me that connection doesn't require telepathy. You've taught me about human concepts like dating, courtship, and marriage. It all sounds so different from Velothi bonding, but also wonderful in its own way. Different how? Jake asked. Velothi bonding is immediate and complete, Zara explained. Two people share their minds, and either they are compatible or they are not. There is no gradual discovery, no slowly growing closer. But humans take time to know each other. You choose to trust someone, choose to care about them, choose to commit to them. It seems like a much more deliberate kind of love. Jake's heart raced. Zara, I need to tell you something. These past few months, getting to know you, working with you today, I've realized that I'm falling in love with you. Zara's eyes widened and her crystalline skin began to glow softly. Jake, I know it's complicated. Jake continued quickly. I know there would be challenges, but I also know that I've never felt as connected to anyone as I feel to you. We understand each other, we work well together, and we make each other happy. Isn't that what love is supposed to be? Zara stared at him for a long moment, and Jake worried he had made a terrible mistake. Then, slowly, she smiled. Yes, she said softly. I think that is exactly what love is supposed to be. The weeks following their mutual confession of love were the happiest of Zara's life. She and Jake spent every free moment together, exploring the station, sharing meals, and learning about each other's cultures. Jake introduced her to human, movies, and music, while Zara showed him Velothi art and philosophy. But their relationship did not go unnoticed. Other Velothi on the station began to whisper about Zara's involvement with a human. Some seemed curious, others disapproving. The human diplomatic team was also beginning to talk, concerned about the political implications of their communications specialist becoming romantically involved with an alien. It's not that we disapprove of your personal choices, Ambassador, Cole told Jake during a private meeting, but we need to consider how this relationship might affect our mission here. With respect, Ambassador, my personal life shouldn't interfere with my professional duties, Jake replied. Under normal circumstances, I would agree, Cole said. But these aren't normal circumstances. We're trying to establish humanity's place in the galactic community. Some species might see your relationship as inappropriate or even exploitative. Jake felt anger rising in his chest. Exploitative? Zara is an intelligent, capable adult who makes her own decisions. Our relationship is based on mutual respect and genuine feelings. I believe you, Cole said gently. But you have to understand how it might look to others. A human from a species without telepathy, becoming involved with a Velothi who can't access her people's primary form of communication. Some might see it as taking advantage of her disability. The conversation bothered Jake for days. He began to worry that their relationship really was causing problems for both of them. He noticed that some of the Velothi who had previously been neutral toward Zara now seemed actively hostile. Her supervisor at work had made several comments about her distractions affecting her performance. Zara noticed his mood change immediately. Something is troubling you, she said one evening as they sat in the observation lounge. Jake hesitated, not wanting to burden her with his concerns. but their relationship was built on honesty and open communication. "People are talking about us," he said finally. "Both humans and Velothi. Some think our relationship is inappropriate or problematic." Zara was quiet for a moment. "Are you having second thoughts?" "No," Jake said quickly. "Never. I love you, Zara. That's not going to change because other people don't understand." "But you're worried about the consequences," Zara said perceptively. "I'm worried about the consequences for you," Jake admitted. "I don't want my feelings to make your life harder than it already is." Zara took his hand in both of hers. "Jake, for the first time in my life I am truly happy. I wake up looking forward to each day because I know I will see you. I have learned what it means to be loved and to love someone in return. Do you think I would give that up because others disapprove?" "But what about your people? What about your future?" "My people have never accepted me as I am," Zara said firmly. "They see my differences as a flaw to be pitied or ignored. But you see my differences as part of who I am. You have never tried to fix me or change me. You have simply loved me." Jake squeezed her hands. "I do love you, more than I ever thought possible." "Then that is all that matters," Zara said. "Jake, I have been thinking about what you told me about human marriage customs, about how humans choose one person to share their life with, to build a future together." Jake's heart began to race. "What about it?" "I want that with you," Zara said simply. "I want to choose you, and I want you to choose me. Not because our minds are compatible, but because our hearts are." Jake stared at her, overwhelmed by emotion. He had been thinking about the same thing for weeks, but had been afraid to bring it up. The idea of marriage between different species was unprecedented in both their cultures. "Are you sure?" he asked. "It wouldn't be easy. We'd face opposition from both our peoples. There would be legal complications, cultural challenges. I have faced opposition my entire life," Zara reminded him. "At least this time I wouldn't be facing it alone." Jake stood up suddenly, pulling Zara to her feet. "There's something I need to do first." Over the next several days, Jake worked, in secret, to prepare for what he was planning. He researched both human and Velothi customs around marriage and commitment. He spoke with Administrator Kelth about the legal requirements for interspecies bonding on the station. He even designed a special ring using techniques from both cultures, incorporating crystalline elements that would appeal to Velothi aesthetics with human metalwork. But most importantly, he decided that their commitment ceremony should make a statement. If they were going to face opposition anyway, they might as well face it boldly and publicly. The weekly diplomatic gathering took place in the station's central plaza, a vast space where representatives from all 47 species met to discuss trade agreements and political issues. Jake had never spoken at one of these gatherings before, but he had requested time on the agenda. As he stood at the speaking podium, looking out at hundreds of beings from dozens of worlds, Jake felt his nervousness disappear. In the crowd he could see Zara sitting with the other station residents, her expression curious and slightly worried. "Respected beings," Jake began, his voice carrying clearly through the translation systems. "I am Jake Morrison of Earth, and I am here to make an announcement that I hope will be heard throughout the galaxy." The plaza grew quiet as species that rarely paid attention to human activities focused on his words. "For too long, our galaxy has operated under the assumption that meaningful relationships can only exist between beings who are similar to each other. We form alliances with species that share our biology, our communication methods, our cultural values. But I am here to suggest that our greatest strength as a galactic community comes not from our similarities, but from our differences." Jake paused, scanning the crowd until his eyes found Zara's. She was staring at him with wide eyes, beginning to realize what he was planning. "I have had the privilege of falling in love with someone who is different from me in almost every way. She comes from a species that communicates telepathically, while I come from one that relies on speech. Her people live for centuries, while mine have much shorter lives. Her culture values mental compatibility above all else, while mine values emotional connection." Murmurs began to ripple through the crowd. Jake could see Velothi representatives shifting uncomfortably, while some humans looked shocked. But despite all these differences, we have found something that transcends species biology and culture. We have found love, respect, partnership, and mutual understanding. We have proven that connection doesn't require telepathy, that commitment doesn't require identical backgrounds, and that love doesn't require similarity. Jake stepped away from the podium and walked directly to where Zara sat. The crowd parted before him, everyone watching in stunned silence. When he reached her, he dropped to one knee and pulled out the ring he had made. "Zara of the Velothi," he said, his voice carrying through the silent plaza. "You have shown me what it means to choose someone not because they complete you, but because they complement you. You have taught me that love is not about finding someone who shares your thoughts, but about finding someone who shares your dreams. Will you marry me?" The plaza was so quiet that Jake could hear his own heartbeat. Zara stared down at him, tears flowing down her crystalline cheeks. Around them, hundreds of beings waited for her response. But Zara was not looking at the crowd. She was looking only at Jake, the human who had seen past her differences to find the person she really was. "Yes," she said, her voice clear and strong, enough for everyone to hear. "Jake Morrison, I choose you. I choose to build a life with you, to face whatever challenges come our way together. I choose love over compatibility, partnership over telepathy, and hope over fear." The plaza erupted in noise as different species reacted to what they had just witnessed. Some cheered, others argued, and many simply stared in amazement. But Jake heard none of it. He slipped the ring onto Zara's finger, stood up, and kissed her gently while the galaxy watched. When they finally broke apart, Zara smiled at him through her tears. "I have something to tell you," she said quietly. "What?" Jake asked. "I never told you the exact wording of the question I wanted to ask you," Zara said. "The question I had been practicing in your language for weeks." Jake looked confused. "What question?" Zara's smile grew wider. "Jake Morrison, will you be my husband?" Jake laughed, pulling her close. "I thought you'd never ask." As they held each other in the center of the plaza, surrounded by the sounds of dozens of species debating the implications of their engagement, Jake realized that they had done something unprecedented. They had chosen each other across the vast differences of species, culture, and biology. They had proven that love was not limited by the boundaries that divided the galaxy. And in doing so, they had given hope to every being who had ever felt alone, different, or unwanted. They had shown that somewhere in the vast universe there was someone for everyone, even if that someone came from an entirely different world.